All right, y'all. Well, thank you all for hanging out, and apologies for the train. Welcome to GulfQuest. My name is Stuart Hood. I'm the Senior Preparator for GulfQuest National Maritime Museum. I handle aspects related to the exhibits, such as the installation of new and traveling exhibits, upkeep, repair, as well as daily operations. So I do a lot of the behind-the-scenes kind of stuff. I'm kind of like the GulfQuest roadie. So for those of you all who are familiar with rock bands, they're the guys behind the scenes. That's me. But in all seriousness, we do have some very nice upcoming events and speakers in the near future. First and foremost, we have our United States Coast Guard exhibit that is here. It has been generously loaned to us from the United States Coast Guard. It features 40 pieces of art, original art, that are depicting the mission and the scope of the U.S. Coast Guard. It's going to be on display in our gallery, which is located on Deck 1A, until December of 2023. On Monday, August 14th, so that's coming up next week, we're going to have Captain Ulysses Mullins. He's going to be speaking in our gallery for our Blue Star Brown Bag Lunch event. This is a free event. Captain Mullins has served with the Coast Guard for over 27 years and is the current commander of Sector Mobile, here in Mobile, Alabama. Excuse me. Attendees will also be invited to see the Coast Guard exhibit following his speak. Additionally, our GulfChats for next month will feature 2 speakers. We're going to have Jason Beeman from the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration and John Schneider, a United States Air Force weather forecaster. These speakers will be leading discussions that are titled Hurricanes on the Northern Gulf Coast, Learning from Past to Prep, and How Does Weather Work? Both of these topics relate to weather issues that we are all too familiar with here along the Gulf of Mexico and how to better prepare for these. I attended Mr. Beeman's presentation last year and it was very, very informative. Finally, in conjunction with our Coast Guard art exhibit, we are working with the Coast Guard to conduct a search and rescue demonstration here along the waterfront, as well as a speaker for the month of September. We are looking at Saturday, September 16th as the date. And additional details will be on our website as well as social media, so please check those out and get back in touch with us if y'all are interested in that event. And now, without any additional delay, I would like to introduce our speaker for the evening. We have Mr. Cam Marston. Mr. Marston is an author, advisor, radio talk host, and a keynote speaker on trends in marketplace and workplace. His firm, General Insights, provides research and consultation to multiple organizations and ranges from small to large businesses. His podcast, What's Working with Cam, focuses on trends in the workplace and marketplace. Many of you know him from his commentaries, Keepin It Real on Alabama Public Radio. Some of Mr. Marston's clients and consultations include work with Charles Schwab, Fidelity, ESPN, NASA, the United States Army, and the United States Department of Agriculture. Mr. Marston is a Mobile native where he lives with his wife Lisa and their 4 children. Without further ado, Mr. Marston, thank you very much for coming this evening, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. I feel like that there's a wonderful expression that is maybe appropriate right now, which is, other than that, how did you like the play, Mrs. Lincoln? So thank you all for sticking around, truly. I recognize the delay and the opportunity to go home early or whatever maybe must have been tempting, but I'm grateful that you're here. I want to say to the AV, the only thing we haven't checked is audio. So I need you to on standby to make sure the audio out of the computer is going to work through the HDMI cable. We'll see that soon, because what we're going to do here is I'm going to give you a little bit of the background and the story of many of these commentaries. I assume you're familiar with them, most of you are at least, or you're stuck, you've been lost in the museum and you can't find your way out. I want to thank the pickleball crowd for coming. I recognize my dad did a great job recruiting. Thank you all so much. And what we're going to do is listen to some of these things and let me tell you the stories behind them. I assume you're somewhat familiar with them. And why I've written them, what I've done. There's a couple that have not been allowed to air on Alabama Public Radio. That were not allowed to be broadcast. I pushed the wrong buttons for the certain people, and I'll play you those. These are kind of the behind-the-scenes exclusive ones, the blackballed ones, if you will. And tell you a little bit about the stories that go into these things. I've realized in going through all these commentaries, which now there are just over 300 of them. We've been doing this for 6 years. that they kind of fall into different segments. Many of them are me trying to figure things out. And I sit down and I begin to write to help me figure these things out. And it's a lot of stuff with personal, a lot of family. If my children ever ask me 10 years from now, Dad, what was my childhood like? I'm like, I got 300 episodes that will tell you exactly what your childhood was like, as I'm trying to figure out what to do. A lot of them are markers in time. And as I recognize a passage of time or some way or another, I get this thing out. Each commentary is about 520 to 530 words. I'm given exactly no more than 3 minutes and 20 seconds by Alabama Public Radio. And I go through and write it and try to get it as best as I can, and then I go through record it and try to get it as best as I can. And it was about 7 years ago now that I asked myself, Cam, if you could do more of what you wanted to do versus what you feel like you should be doing. I was approaching 50. If you could do more of what you wanted to do versus always what you feel like you should be doing, what would that be? It was the first time I've ever allowed myself that question. And I thought, I'd like to try to do this. I'd like to try to write these commentaries. I've always enjoyed them. Can I do it? Am I good enough? So I reached out to Elizabeth Brock. At the time, she ran Alabama Public Radio, which is based in Tuscaloosa. I found her online. And I called her and said, Elizabeth, my name is Cam Marston. You've never met me. You have no reason to know me. But here's what I want to do. Would you let me try? And her answer was, I tell you what, write 10 and send them to me. So for the next 6 weeks, I've struggled to write 10 commentaries and realized it's not as easy as I had thought. But I got the 10 and I sent them to her. And she called and she said, all right, record 5. She was putting me through the ringer. Does he like the idea or can he do the work? And I recorded 5 and sent them to her. And she said, all right, I'm going to coach you. Here's what you need to do differently. And I was articulating every word and every sentence. I was making it sound flawless, not conversational. And she coached me on that. And she spent some time with me and I re-recorded it and she coached me again. And after about 6 weeks of going back and forth after sending her the initial 10, she said, here's the deal. If they show up every Thursday by midday, we'll play them Friday. But there's no contract, there's no agreement. You retain rights to all these things. We don't own them. We'll just play them for you. And I said, well, let's give it a shot. And that was 300 plus commentaries ago. And I love the challenge and I love the discipline and I love what it makes me do and think and talk about. And I love it when friends of mine, John Gage is sitting up front, come to me and says, here's where you missed the mark on that one, Cam. It's like, oh, thanks, John. I really appreciate your. He's been very complimentary. Many people have been very complimentary and I want to play some of these. So I've got, I think, 10. They're each about 3 minutes. We can go through all of them. We don't have to go through all of them. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the stories of each of them. We'll play them and little anecdotes about them after they're done. And then we'll open it up to questions, if any of you have any questions or comments or whatever it may be. So here's where we're about to test the audio. You look confident. The first one is called Ketchup. And this one is, it's a marker. It was a marker in time for us as I noticed that we had no ketchup in the house. And if you're the parent of small children, ever had small children in the house, you probably recognize the significance of ketchup in the child's diet. Ultimately, it becomes everything that they eat is under ketchup. It's not accented with ketchup, it's under ketchup. And when I looked around not long ago and realized we didn't have any, I thought, now, ketchup was a big deal in our household. We don't have any, and it was, and well, I'll let the story tell itself.
Keeping It Real, Cam tells us about feeding his kids when they were much younger and how one particular condiment ultimately kept them alive.
There's no ketchup in my house right now. I made burgers for the family Sunday night. We had no ketchup. And this may sound trivial, but it's an extraordinary landmark in our family's life. When my kids were much younger, my wife and I relied on frozen chicken nuggets about 5 nights a week to feed the kids. Our 4 kids are 2 years apart, with the last 2 being twins. Imagine dinner time with a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and 2-year-old twins. It was pandemonium. We'd pop a cookie sheet full of chicken nuggets into the oven. They were quick, they were easy, and though they weren't particularly healthy, they kept the kids alive until the next day, which at that point is all we wanted. Chicken nuggets were our bread and butter. They were our lifesaver. In time, though, the kids tired of them. We experimented with different brands, with different shaped nuggets. We learned that rib meat nuggets were too chewy, and who knew chickens had ribs? And the kids were unimpressed by the dinosaur-shaped nuggets. We then told them they weren't eating nuggets anymore. These were new. These were different. These were chicken nougatas. They're different and better. And that bought us a little time. Then we added a small dollop of ketchup to the side of their plate, and boom. The kids loved the nuggets with the ketchup. They wanted more ketchup and more. And soon it became a plate full of ketchup with chicken nuggets somewhere underneath. I told my wife that the word KID was an acronym for Ketchup Infusion Device, because that's what the nuggets became. We bought the ketchup at warehouse clubs, 3 giant bottles shrink-wrapped together, wondering how long the ketchup would last before we'd need more. We walked through the back door with the bottles of ketchup over our heads, like warriors returning with the spoils of battle. The kids saw it and knew everything was going to be okay. The kids liked chicken nuggets with ketchup so much that my wife and I began calling everything we cooked chicken. We'd have pork chicken, beef chicken, turkey chicken, each of which was served under ketchup. We tried weaning our kids off the ketchup, but when the food hit the table, they'd be looking for the bottle. We wondered if we'd gone too far, but they were eating and they weren't complaining, which if you're a parent, you understand. If my kids were like trees, and we could cut them in half and count their rings, their innermost rings would be made entirely of chicken nuggets and lots of ketchup. And then last Sunday night, I bring the hot burgers in from the grill and start putting the toppings on the countertop, and no ketchup. Not even the secret reserve bottle which we keep in the back of the pantry for emergencies. None. When I announced we had no ketchup, I braced for the blowback. Years ago, this news would have fueled an insurrection. Instead, they shrugged and fixed their plate. My goodness, how things have changed. Thank the Lord. I'm Cam Marston, just trying to keep it real.
To hear more commentaries, search for Keepin' It Real with Cam Marston on your favorite podcast app, or follow Cam Marston on social media.
So the way it works is that I create the commentary and I send it up to public radio, and I give them the opening lines, and I tell them this is how to introduce the commentary, read these words. And they do, and then I also send the commentary locally to a guy named Johnny Gwynn, and he animates it like that, which you saw there, which you'll see throughout this thing. You'll see his different styles as we go through, and so that we can use them on social media. And I paste them on social media. Johnny's pretty good with the announcing. You'll hear some weird things in there, but I have to write the commentary, I have to write the announcement, or the introduction to the commentary. And every time I hear one of these things, I hear missed opportunities. Oh, I could have punched that word better. I could have done that a little differently. I think I always say, oh, there was so much meat left on the bone. I sit there with my wife on Friday mornings and listen to these things and say, oh, I missed an opportunity there. And I sat down with another writer one time, and he said, I've never written something that I thought was good. I've written it and I submitted it, and I've always found reasons that I should have done things differently, which is kind of an interesting thing. It's like I said, these commentaries are markers. I use them to identify things that are going on in the world around me, my life, my family, my friends. They're truly therapeutic in so many ways. I don't pay a therapist. I write these things out, and it needs to be resolved in 520 words, or it's going to be too big of a problem. And I feature people and friends that I know and that I like, and am always listening for something that could turn into content. And it won't be long before you'll hear a story about a train. I can promise you, a story about a train. I'm thinking, I'm watching everything, thinking, all right, how am I going to describe this? What is the words to use? And this is one that was another marker in time. Not about a missing catch-up, but, physically things are changing.
On this week's Keeping It Real, Cam Marston tells us about an organ recital he attends with his friends. It's not what you think.
The pickleball bug has bitten. A buddy put together a group of guys all about the same age to play each Wednesday evening not long ago. We showed up. Most of us knew each other. We debated the rules for a while, and we got started. It's now a regular thing. Each time we gather, we shake hands, we catch up a bit, and each of us, whether we are asked or not, goes through what's called the organ recital. It's a part of what happens when men of a certain age or older gather. Maybe women too, but I can only speak to what the men do. We talk about what hurts on our body, how well or how poorly we've been sleeping, who we know that's sick. We talk about digestion, about what foods are kind to us and which ones we struggle with, which spices upset our stomach and which medicines help and which ones don't seem to do anything at all. It's the organ recital. Doesn't last long. Usually someone says, "Hey, enough. We sound like old men. Let's play." And that ends it. And then we start putting on knee braces and patella tendon straps and tendinitis sleeves. It's so sad. My father has a golf group that set up rules around their organ recitals. He and his buddies have played golf every Friday morning for the past decade or more. Their rule is that once the last putt falls into the cup on the first hole, the organ recital must end. It's a rule they've all embraced. However, my father says, many of his friends are now nearly deaf, and they keep giving their organ recitals anyway because they can't hear anyone telling them to stop. It's the rare privilege of the hard of hearing, not being able to hear when you're being admonished. My dad is quite the pickleballer himself. He plays several days a week at the Via Senior Center in Mobile. He's got a regular crowd, and they pair up to play, and then they swap teams, and they do it for hours, men and women. He invited me a few weeks back. I guessed I'd be the youngest person there, which was true, and that I'd have an unfair advantage because of that, which was untrue. I got my tail beaten repeatedly. These so-called seniors are savage pickleball players, and what they may lack in speed, they make up with precise ball placement. At one point, my 85-year-old father and I were playing together, and across the net was an 83-year-old lady and her 60-ish-year-old daughter. Father-son versus mother-daughter. The mom had a wicked serve, and at any time could place the ball within a millimeter of wherever she wanted it. My dad and I just barely won, and I walked off the court laughing at the thought that my youth, which is very relative, would create any advantage. At some point in the match, I lunged for a well-placed shot from the 82-year-old mother and pulled something in my lower back. I soldiered on, unwilling to admit to myself that an 82-year-old was making a fool of me on the pickleball court. I, of course, dutifully reported my injury the next week at my pickleball group's organ recital, but when asked about the opponent who did this to me, I kept things a bit vague. I'm Kim Marston, just trying to keep it real.
To hear more commentary,
They all end the same way. Pickleball crowd, and my father's in the back, is a wonderful group of friends that he's made, and I envy and admire what he's created with that crowd. But it's the organ recital. I remember him mentioning that to me, going, "Oh, I've got to find a place for that. That's just too dang good." Which leads me to where things can get sideways, and it's the one that I'm about to play is called the Uterpot, Uterpot, and it was controversial. It's, in my opinion, and I'm the author, hysterical. It's absolutely flawless. But it's controversial, particularly to my wife, and she's the subject to a lot of these commentaries. And I got a call from the woman at Alabama Public Radio who is the final screener for these things. And she says, "Cam, I don't know. We don't want to get any phone calls." And I said, "It's a compliment. It's kind of a compliment." She said, "I need you to rewrite it." So I rewrote some of it, and they played it. And it's always gotten kind of a, mixed review. But I have to admit, I think it's funny. And I expect that when it's over here in a very few minutes, many of you will hate me. It's just kind of the way this thing works. But we rewrote it, and I'll tell you more about Brittany. She's the final word on these commentaries after this commentary about the one that she absolutely vetoed, and then I couldn't win her over on it. So this one's called Uterpot, and I'll tell you at the end why it was so controversial.
on this
this week's episode of Keepin' It Real, Cam Marston tells us how he plans to make the dodo bird unextinct. Mastodons and brontosauruses too.
My wife is famous for her ability to rapidly kill a perfectly healthy plant. Nothing green survives her. My wife is a glorious, kind, and gentle woman. I love her dearly, but she kills plants. She can't help it, she just does. She does not have a green thumb, she has a cyanide-colored thumb, whatever color that is. And she knows this about herself. She stepped away from all duties involving growing plants and turned them over to me. When it comes to growing plants, I'm much better than she is, but then again, the Grim Reaper is better than she is at growing plants. What my wife grows well is babies. My wife can grow a baby. Zygotes love it in there. They don't want to leave. They grow like they're feeding from a trough at Western Sizzler. Our oldest child weighed over 10 pounds at birth. She was fat-shamed at the tender age of 30 seconds when the first words her little baby ears ever heard was the delivery room doctor hollering, "Whoa, what a chunker." And due to my daughter's size, they induced our second child a week early, and he came out at over 9 pounds. He'd have been near 11 pounds had he gone the distance. And the twins were induced 2 weeks early, and both were over 7 pounds. When my wife was pregnant with the twins, I couldn't sleep at night. She gained 45 pounds. You've heard the sounds of balloons stretching? That's the sound I heard next to me all night long. My wife can grow a baby. A plant? No. A baby? Oh my Lord. I've proposed that at some point we take my wife's uterus, bronze it, and put it on the mantle above the fireplace out of reverence for its amazing abilities. Today, however, I think there may be a better use. I now think we should shape her uterus into a small pot and plant rare or nearly extinct vegetation in it. Some threatened species of fern or jungle hardwood would proliferate if it were planted in my wife's amazing uter pot. She'd be celebrated by the Sierra Club and maybe win a Nobel Prize. Or we could put a fossilized dinosaur egg in her amazing uter pot, incubate it under a 100-watt bulb, and watch as a Triceratops or a Brontosaurus hatches. They'd be huge and healthy. Scientists may even have to induce the dinosaurs by cracking the egg early if they threaten to outgrow my wife's amazing uter pot. Is there a dodo bird egg out there? I know how to make the dodo bird unextinct. And I read that scientists were trying to recreate a mastodon by combining elephant DNA with DNA from mastodon fossils. If they ever get any traction on it, they should call me, and we'll gently place that little mastodon zygote into my wife's amazing uter pot, and we'll have us a mastodon. Easy. I guess the question is, would my wife and I have to raise the mastodon? Perhaps you can say, that's the elephant in the room. I'm Cam Marston, just trying to keep it real. Oh, and as a footnote, Alabama Public Radio thought this was both sexist and offensive and wouldn't air this commentary. If you think it is, let me know. My wife didn't, it's about her. But if you think it is, let me know. I'm really curious. Maybe I'm missing something. It's intended to be fun and funny and a little bit irreverent and a little bit, I don't know. Let me know.
So they ended up rewriting, I rewrote it and they did broadcast it. But the comment that I got was, it makes women sound like their sole purpose on the planet Earth is to have babies. And I said, well, that's not exact. Anyway, I went back and forth with them and I've played it a number of times. But I challenge you to do this. Say the words amazing uter pot 2 or 3 times and you'll never not want to say it again. It's a wonderful little phrase that rolls off your tongue. Amazing uter pot. So the process is I send the commentaries up and Brittany reviews them and she listens to them and she blesses them, and then one of the people in there, usually an intern, will edit them and get them ready for broadcast and put them into the lineup. And if they don't go, if she doesn't like them, she calls me and says that we're not going to do this one. And it's only happened twice. 300, it's only happened twice. And the story is that I went up to Tuscaloosa for business meetings and thought, I've never met these people. I've actually only met 2 people from in Tuscaloosa, and I've only been up there twice, after working with them for 6 years. And they had said the week before, we're not going to air this. Sorry, Cam, we're not going to air this, the one that I'm about to play. And I said, okay, well, I argued for it, and they said no. And I went up there for business meetings, and I had already scheduled to meet with them and to say, hey, we've never met. You're very important to me, and I hope you're fond of me. Let's meet. So we met at a downtown restaurant in Tuscaloosa. And we both came in, and we were polite and kind, and it was Brittany, and it was, I think, Rob, her boss. And we sat there, and I learned later on, they thought I was coming in to quit, to say, I don't want to do it anymore. How dare you not play my commentary? I thought they wanted to have lunch with me to fire me. So we both were sitting at that table waiting for the other person to quit. And finally, it came out that I like doing this. And they said, well, we like you doing it too. So, well, then we'll keep going. And they said, yeah, that's great. And then he said to me, Rob said to me, your job, Cam, as I see it, your job is to find the line. I want you to write stuff that you think is right up against the line, whatever that may be. Kind of controversial. See what you can do. Do not be offended if we say no. Know that you've found the line and we're pushing you back a little bit. But don't stop. Keep trying to find the line. Now, one of the things that I don't do is talk politics. I don't get into us versus them. I will talk about politics, but I don't talk politics. It's a subtle difference. And it would be us versus them versus let's talk about the Republicans and what they're doing versus the Democrats and what they're doing, and I try to throw humor into it. In fact, tomorrow's commentary will be about just that. It's about caricatures and that are truly alive today. They're not caricatures, they're real, and they don't even know that they're a caricature of themselves. I'll wait for tomorrow for that. So this one, though, was January 2020. And there was a lot going on in DC, and I had some feelings about it, and I wrote this. And they said, we're not playing it. And they said, Cam, if based on the administration in the White House this time, right now, if anyone stirs the pot in what we do, public radio, public television, we're afraid the White House is going to find us out, all of us, not just Alabama Public Radio, but across the nation, and attack. That's the motive. So we, public radio leaders across the nation, public television leaders across the nation have said, let's keep our heads down, folks. Let's keep it quiet. Keep doing what we're doing, but do not find controversy right now, because controversy would be not helpful. And then I sent them this.
On today's episode of Keeping It Real, Cam Marston recounts two different interpretations of our times today from two different people who claim an inside track on what God is trying to tell us.
This will be controversial. A friend attended a presentation by a Christian speaker a couple of weeks ago and told me that the speaker used details from the Old Testament book of Isaiah to suggest that 9/11 was a warning sent by God for us to essentially straighten up. The speaker cited details of 9/11 and the rebuilding of the New York site, from the type of stone used to the species of trees planted. All this, the speaker said, had been foretold in Isaiah. Furthermore, we've been given a gift directly from God to lead us out of these turbulent times. That person is our president. Per the book of Isaiah, the angels would trumpet his arrival, the speaker said. And it's no coincidence our president's name is Trump. Per the speaker, Trump is a gift directly from God. I offered a different interpretation. Mine came from a podcast interview of a Franciscan priest, and oddly, much of his content also came from the book of Isaiah. The word Lucifer, he said, means carrier of light. And throughout history, Lucifers, they appear in times of vulnerability, claim to be the only ones who can solve the problems of our times. With what's called messianic certainty, these Lucifers, with huge personalities and overflowing charisma, proclaim to be the only ones who can carry the light to the people. They proclaim to be our saviors. Hitler was one. He called himself a genius and a great man. In his speeches and writings, he implied that he alone held the key to Germany's destiny, that he was chosen for it by above. Today it's known as the Führer principle. Never once did Hitler show humility, gratitude, or a sense of grace, which is associated with doing God's work. And we've heard similar statements here recently. I alone can fix it, Trump said, referring to the challenges at hand. And more recently, I am the chosen one. He too appears void of humility, gratitude, or a sense of grace. The Franciscan then talked about society being possessed, not ancient possessions of people consumed by demons, but being possessed by Lucifer to agree, to fall in line, to shield him with excuses for what he says and what he does, to chant with the crowd, and to rail against and persecute those who disagree, who are outside the possession. Lucifer, the priest suggested, may be among us again. I think it's amazing that both the speaker and the priest use the same book of the Bible to claim to know what God is telling us, yet arrive at diametrically opposite conclusions. It's beautiful that they have differing opinions. It's horrifying their opinions are so far apart. So what do you think? Is our president a gift from God or a Lucifer? Me? I'm Keepin Marston, and I'm just trying to keep it real.
I got out of the answer, as you can hear, but that was blackballed. This one that I'll play next is one that a story that I've been telling for a long time, an observation, if you will, and it's the only one that I'm told has ever generated a phone call to the station, and it's about the different communication styles between men versus women. And what I have been told by many of my friends, particularly my male friends, is they said, hey, I played this one for my wife. I wanted you to know that. I made her sit down and listen to this. And it's just a funny observation that happened in about a 10-second period of time as I watched my wife wake up from a nap on the couch. And one of the things, and it just occurred to me that this maybe explains a lot of the differences out there. And again, not one that she particularly finds funny. She laughs at the humor of it, but anyway, I'll play it for you.
On today's installment of Keeping It Real, Cam addresses an insight he's had about the different communication styles between men and women, which he thinks explains a lot.
This commentary is not politically correct. It may offend some listeners. And here's my response. I'm going to do it anyway because this commentary is for the greater good. So here we go. The topic of men versus women has been discussed for ages. But I'm going to offer my insight in a way that I think will help many listeners, especially the men. Because what I've discovered is, frankly and in all humility, brilliant. My wife was napping in front of the TV, came out of her sleep, and sat up talking. There was no stirring, no slow transition into wakefulness, no gradual beginning of a conversation. She woke up, sat up, and started talking all in the same moment. I was fascinated and frankly, a bit alarmed. But it led me to this. When it comes to communication, and notice I'm not talking about content here, just the act of talking. When it comes to communication at birth, each man on planet Earth is given a set number of words to say every day, a limit, a restriction. Each male's number is different. Some men have piles of words, others have few. And most importantly, when they hit their number, they're out. The restriction kicks in and they simply can't talk after that. They're out of words. Women, though, are born with an hourly quota they must hit. And if they don't hit their quota, it rolls into the next hour, kind of a penalty. And they can't sleep at night until their hourly quota for the day is met. Naps don't count, which explains why my wife came out of her nap talking. She had a number to hit and would be penalized in the next hour if she didn't hit it. Now let's bring this concept into our daily lives. And this is easy to imagine. A wife says, honey, how was your day? He says, fine. What happened, she says. Not much, he says. He offers nothing. Why? He's out of words. He's used them all up during this busy day. He's at his limit. He's helpless. She, however, needs to talk. She has an hourly number to hit. She's still got work to do. So she talks a lot about her day while he remains silent. So they're both having to operate within their gender restrictions, each helpless to their circumstance. My wife, you should know, is not a fan of this theory. I explained it to her one night, and she won't accept that I could be out of words, and she let me have it. talking on and on about how it was sexist and wrong, and that she wants to know how I feel and needs me to be more empathetic and on, until she stopped talking, climbed into bed, and turned out the lights. Her final hourly quota was met for the day. It was time to sleep, recharge, and get ready to chase her number the next day. Bingo. I'm Ken Marston, just trying to keep it real.
So,
To learn more about Cam Marston and his
I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. I love doing these things. I can't tell you how fun they are for me. And I didn't know when I began that I would enjoy it so much. It was a challenge. Can I do this? And then all day, every day, I'm looking for content and trying to figure out how to write it, and have really begun enjoying it. Some of them that I'll play, next one, were really hard to write. They were emotional, and they helped me get through things. In fact, the next two were emotional ones that helped me get through things. And the first one is about my daughter going off to college. We have 4, as you've heard through the commentaries, and I didn't know what to expect when I took my oldest one to school. And I had plans on what it would be like, and I realized how woefully negligent my plans were, or how I thought I'd handle it and how poorly I did handle it. And I wrote this thing, and I wrote it through wet eyes, and then I had no idea how hard it would be to record. And I must have tried, and this is not an exaggeration, 20 times to get it right. I wanted this one to be a good one, and I wanted the intonations and everything right. And once I felt like I had it, I'd start weeping into the microphone again and have to start it all over again. And I was just a basket case in the little closet that we have that I use to record these things in. If there had been a video camera in there, it would have been shameful to rewatch that thing. But this one is called, what is this one called? It's called Freshman.
On this week's Keeping It Real, Ken Marston relives a tough weekend of when he dropped his oldest child off at college.
A quote that I've always liked goes something like this: "You've been a successful parent when your child, as an adult, wants you, but doesn't need you." My wife and I dropped our oldest child at Ole Miss this past weekend. As a college freshman, she's not quite an adult, so the jury's still out on whether we've been successful or not. Will she want us, but not need us, or need us, but not want us? Time will tell. For years, I boasted loudly that when I dropped my children at college, it would be a simple, practical, unemotional affair. It's not a reason to get sappy. It's a celebration. My parents showed no emotion when they dropped me at college, I'd say. However, my parents told me recently that after they left me at college, they cried the whole way home. I never knew this. In the past few years, though, as this day approached, I realized how wrong I was about being unemotional. And I stopped making this boast. Then, gradually, I began walking the boast back, and then ultimately doing a 180-degree about-face to the point of declaring myself a hypocrite and admitting that this college drop-off event would be an emotional affair and that I would be a complete basket case. And I did not disappoint. I kept it together pretty well most of the weekend. My wife and I would make eye contact and we'd get teary, but it wouldn't last long and there was work to do. After a long day moving her in, we all went to dinner Saturday night, and I later dropped her off at her dorm for her first night there. And I couldn't talk as we drove away. Sunday, though, the waterworks really started. There would be one less person climbing out of the car when we got home. An empty chair at the kitchen table that night. One fewer groggy heads to ready for school the next day. My daughter and I said goodbye on the curb in front of a coffee shop on the square. I had a long list of hopes and praises for her prepared in my head, but I couldn't speak. I held her tightly, I kissed her forehead, and I looked through my tear-filled eyes into hers, forced a smile, and walked to the car. My wife and kids did the same. When a child becomes an adult, it's the child that determines the intimacy of the relationship with their parent. The child sets the terms. What will this look like with my daughter and me? What will she want from me? Will she even want me? Or will she just need me? So many thoughts. And with each new thought, more wet eyes. Monday morning, I texted her, Hey, sweetie, thinking about you. Do you need anything? No, Dad, nothing. Thanks. And then a moment later, hey, Dad, I miss you. More waterworks. Maybe she'll want me. I'm Kim Marston, and I'm just trying to keep it.
To hear more
That was a tough one.
search for Keepin It Real.
But I was very proud of that. Now, I'm looking at the time. I was told we'd give an hour. We did have a delayed start. Would you like me to keep going, or do you want to, or is it, yes? I get nods, yes? Okay, let's keep going. This was, you did wait for this, yeah. And I hope this is what you expected. I've given so many presentations. I don't know if you know this, but for the past, it was kind of in the introduction, but for the past 20 years, I've given 30, 40, sometimes one year is 100 presentations about business-related stuff. This is the first presentation of this type I've ever given, so I don't know what to do. This next one is another hard one to write. My mother died on March 5th, 18 months ago-ish, and I took a break. Well, you'll hear the story, but this one was another tough one to write. It was a tough chapter for all of our family.
On today's Keepin It Real, Cam Marston tells us about a great memory he has of playing with his children in the yard one beautiful fall afternoon when his mother drove up.
I remember a day in the fall, years ago, when I was playing in the front yard with my 4 children. We were wrestling in the grass on a perfect and beautiful day. My kids would squeal and run at me, and I'd gently lift them and put them on their backs and tickle them a little bit. And then another would run and jump on me over and over again. At one point I looked around and I couldn't find my youngest daughter. It's not like her to disappear. She was a short distance away, sitting on my mother's back, who had joined the ruckus. Mom was on all fours in the grass, giving my youngest daughter a horseyback ride across the yard. My daughter's grin and my mother's smile remain etched in my mind to this day. And then I saw my mother's car. It was in the middle of the road, the door was wide open, and the engine was running. She had driven up, seen the fun, and immediately jumped in with us. I have a photo of my mother with my daughter on her back from that day, and their huge smiles. It pops up on my phone whenever my mother calls. By the time this airs Friday, my mother will have been deceased 6 days. She died last Saturday. It was a long, slow decline, and how I wish I could see that picture pop up on my phone. Just one more time. I've never lost a parent, and while the death from her illness was foretold a long time ago, I've been surprised at how it's impacted me. I had many chances to express my love and my gratitude to my mother, and I did each time. As my brother put it to my father and me, we need to all make sure we're all square with Mom. And we did, many times. Many tears and many strange emotions I've not had before poured out each time. All a part of loss and the beginning of grieving, I suppose. As I write this commentary, it's Tuesday afternoon, and I've taken a break from preparing Mom's eulogy that my father and brothers have asked me to deliver tomorrow. It's a great honor and a great responsibility to have a hand in shaping people's final thoughts and images of my mother. And I want my words to soar tomorrow. I want them to be the best I'm capable of, my best ever, to be worthy of a woman who has had such a great impact, not only on me and my family, but on the countless people in our community. If you knew my mother, you'd know what I'm talking about. I'm worried that the task is too great for me, and I'm worried about keeping my composure. So, I'll soldier on. Preparation will be key. And I'll get back to writing and rehearsing this eulogy, with an eye on my phone wishing her picture would pop up just one more time. I'm Cam Marston, and I'm just trying to keep it together.
To hear more commentaries, search for Keepin It Real with Cam Marston.
So that was a tough one to write, and it was literally, and what I try to do in some of these, and I don't know if you noticed, but I try to bring you into the moment with me. It's now Tuesday, and I've stepped away, and I'm doing exactly this. And I find that when I hear things like that, and I read things like that, I connect more with the content, and that's what I try to do. The other thing I try to do is try to slow the image down that I'm trying to talk about. And I don't know, I've never been taught this, but I see something and I'm going to take 2.5 minutes to describe what I saw in 10 seconds. Slow it down, tell the detail. And I feel like that, at least for me, it makes it a more rewarding process. So it's kind of one of the skills that I've tried to develop. And the third one that I try to, and if you listen for them, you'll hear them, and in just about every commentary, is the rule of three, is what they call it. Friends, Romans, countrymen. By the people, for the people, of the people. All these phrases of threes that are roughly about the same meter. And you'll hear me try to do that at least once in every commentary, because I think it's ear candy. It makes you want to listen. We go from these sentimental and perhaps a little touching ones into things that are a little bit irreverent. And every time that I try to do one of these sentimental and touching programs, I have this ache to tell a dirty joke. It's like, all right, let's push this pendulum back the other way now. Let's be irreverent. And of course, you can't tell a dirty joke, but you go in and you just try to do something, at least for me, to get away from that emotion and go over here where things are just a little more raw. And you have to be careful of how raw you can get because, of course, I've got this lady in Tuscaloosa who has veto power. But you can touch on this a little bit. And that's what you'll hear here.
On this week's episode of Keeping It Real, Cam Marston sends us a postcard from his vacation on Highway 30A in Florida.
I'm on the front porch of a rental home on Highway 30A in the Florida Panhandle, drinking medium roast coffee, looking at homes that all look nearly the same. It's become clear to me, if a eunuch could be a place, it would be Highway 30A. This place has no seed. It has no soul. It's undeniably beautiful, from the beaches to the planned developments to the people. But it lacks oomph. It's the most homogeneous place I know. I've spent some time here over the years, and I struggle to find the words that describe how I feel. It's as if the Morton Salt Company spilled people, houses, cars, skin tones, and accents along a stunningly beautiful stretch of beach. Everything about it is all nearly the same. And it's not for me. While I know I'll be back since my family and my friends enjoy it, I'd be happy to be done with it. Some people spend their vacationing time going to places and being with people who are very much like themselves. They travel to places where they can allow their senses to be muted and, as they often say, they can relax. They vacation amongst and amidst the familiar. There's a second group, of which I consider myself a member, who prefer to spend their time vacationing amidst the unknown, the different, where their senses are stimulated and piqued, where there's a feeling of risk, of uncertainty. I'm a curious guy, and I mean that in both ways. And I'm most stimulated when I'm someplace different, someplace new, a bit uncomfortable, and learning. My most memorable vacations and my favorite destinations are to places that are very different from my norm. If you're a middle-aged white person and you enjoy being surrounded by people who look, sound, talk, smell, drive, read, dress, diet, can't dance, can't jump, and have the same number of children as you, there is no better place in the Southeast for you than 30A. You'll love it here. To many of my friends, 30A is their happy place. They struggle to understand how someone could not be over the moon for it. However, some of these people are the very same ones who say their favorite view of New Orleans is when it's in their rearview mirror. I don't agree. There are so many different things going on in New Orleans, so many different types of people, lots of unknowns, lots of surprises, and occasionally some moments of sheer discomfort. And it's because of all of that that places like New Orleans attracts me. New Orleans has soul. It's where I wish I were right now, drinking a strong cup of coffee, wondering what surprises will unfold today. Here, monotony runs the show. I'm Cam Marston, just trying to keep it real.
There are a lot of people that really like 30A. It's not for me. I have a great fondness for New Orleans. If you've listened to many of these, you'll hear that I reference that quite a bit. I went to college there, and there's just, as I say, there's this feeling when you're walking through New Orleans, and that is, it's a feeling of fear. And that's what that is. And it's behind you all the time. And I kind of like that. As long as I'm on the good side of the fear, I kind of like that. So we'll finish up with a couple of more here that have been perhaps some of the most popular ones. And that is because they touch the irreverent scale. And I've always, as the number of speeches I've given over the years, there's truly hundreds of them, I've never been asked to be a graduation speaker. And I thought that would be great. However, this is what it would sound like.
On this week's episode of Keeping It Real, Cam has never been asked to give a commencement speech at a high school graduation, probably because it would sound like this.
Good afternoon. For generations, a rite of passage in our society is for you to sit there while an overly proud and bombastic speaker drones on, imparting the wisdom they feel they've gained over the years, boring you to death. None of it's relevant, much less important. It's a dull and awful part of the graduation process, and I have no intention of letting you get out of it. Now then, you're graduating because you followed the instructions given to you by your teachers, your parents, your counselors, and everyone else on what to do, when to be where, what to study, how to prepare, all that. And while I say good job, I also say big deal. You're being rewarded for doing exactly what you were told to do. That's a bit like kissing your sister. That's not hard. There's been a little mystery along the way. The next step, you'll have many fewer people telling you what to do. And how you act then is the real test. What will you do when there's no one looking? When no one is shaking you out of bed or monitoring your homework? So, you're graduating from high school. I'm unimpressed. Next, somewhere down the road, people will tell you that you deserve to, or you've earned the right to go out and find a good job that makes you happy. That's junk. I want you to go find a bad job that makes you miserable. I promise you'll learn so much more and become a more interesting person from a bad job that makes you miserable. The first thing you'll learn is how precious a good job is and what makes it a good job. I bet every one of your parents has had at least one or two jobs that were bad and made them miserable. Those jobs taught them a whole lot about themselves and motivated them to change. Myself, I once sold doorknobs as a telemarketer. No lie, I've also had to sell gourmet Asian sauces in eastern North Carolina, where the only thing those people eat is barbecue pork and sweet tea 3 times a day. But I did it, and I learned I never wanted to do it again. Those were bad jobs. They made me miserable, and it taught me to change, or else I'd be miserable the rest of my life. Next, according to psychologists, happiness is highest in late adolescence and early adulthood, then drops until you're old. Then you become happy again. So that happiness you're feeling right now, don't get used to it. Cherish it for the fleeting feeling it is. Then a handful of years, it'll be gone. See your old parents out there? See them smiling? They're happy again. They know what I'm talking about. And a lot of their happiness has to do with the fact that you're about to be out of the house. They love you, and they'll cry when you leave. But it will be a short cry. Now, wake up the person next to you and come get your diploma. Your parents' champagne is chilled and ready to drink. Let's not keep them waiting any longer. I'm Cam Marston. I'm just trying to
Hear more of Cam Marston's commentaries?
We had to, that one was long, and we had to accelerate there's a function within the software that allows you to compress the audio, and you could hear how quickly I was talking for that one. And this will be the final one. This one's called Middle Age Lame. This is a golf tournament. I've only ever entered one golf tournament. I'll never do that again. I've learned my lesson. It's an expensive lesson. But as I walked up and down those fairways and participated in that tournament, I could see around me this commentary forming on its own. And all I had to do was write what I saw. And it was passed around amongst all the golfers later, and I think the humor in it was because they all saw themselves. You know, the funniest stuff is seeing the truth, and that's what happened when they heard this.
On this week's episode of Keeping It Real, Cam Marston tells us about the first golf tournament he's ever played in and how well he fit in, unfortunately.
I have never played in a golf tournament until this past weekend, and I signed up at the urging of some friends. I found a golf partner who had never done this before either, and he and I set out to slay our opponents. We got killed and tied for last in our flight. The tournament itself was flawless. The hospitality of the hosting organization was flawless. The customer service of every individual I had contact with who was part of the event was flawless. It was a great event. But here's what I took away from the weekend. Here's what stood out. If you are ever curious to know what a bunch of middle-aged, primarily white guys do when they get together for 3 days of golf, you shouldn't be. I say that being one of these people. We are a horrifically boring, uncreative, homogeneous, but very, very nice and polite group of people who can't dance to save our lives. I watched it all weekend and felt sad for my people. When I saw us try to dance, though, I had to turn away. It was like watching an unbalanced washing machine, kind of randomly wobbling in the laundry room, with no concern at all with the music or the beat. Every stereotype you can come up with fits. We ordered the same drinks at the bar. It was this newish drink that I was unfamiliar with called the White Claw, and it was the rage this weekend, probably because they're gluten-free and low on calories or carbs or something like that. We wore nearly identical clothes the entire weekend. Even the 70s themed costume party had most of the men wearing nearly identical costumes. All of us had even bought the costumes the same way. If you want to know how we dressed, go to Amazon.com and enter 70s disco costumes for men in the Amazon search bar. And everything that shows up in the top 2 or 3 rows of items was at the costume party. Hardly anything else. At one point, I drove past another foursome of golfers. They were stopped, waiting for the group ahead of them to clear the green so they could hit. They were wearing nearly the same clothes. And I promise I'm not making this up. They were playing James Taylor from their portable speaker. Is there anything more middle-aged white guy than 4 guys in nearly identical clothes, all who had the same haircut if they had any hair, listening to James Taylor? They were probably talking about mutual funds or the economy. I shook my head. Shame. Mind you, I'm a part of this group. I saw myself out there many, many times in many places. And I kept wondering if penguins were to come stare at us as we played golf, would they look at each other and say, they all look exactly the same to me. How can they tell each other apart? It's time to change. It's time to shake things up. It's time for the over 50-year-old Cam 2.0 to come out of my shell and feel free to be me. Maybe I'll get a plaid shirt. I'm Cam Marston, and I'm just trying to keep it real.
To learn more about Cam Marston.
So the plaid shirt is as crazy as this guy's going to get, right? So they've been going on, that's what I've got prepared. They've been going on now for 6 years. We're just over 300. They're therapeutic to me. I truly enjoy doing them. And I'm grateful that you all came. If you're not lost and came here intentionally, I'm grateful that you're in the room. I enjoy writing. I appreciate you listening to them. Tomorrow at noon, I'm giving a presentation in Birmingham to the Alabama Broadcasters Association. And I will be there talking about these commentaries. I'll be talking about workplace trends. They're all trying to hire people. But I'll finish up with, hey, let me let you hear my radio show, which airs weekly on 106.5, and the commentaries. And I'd love, I'll tell these people, I'd love for you to consider putting them on your station. And hopefully they'll give that some consideration. So I enjoy it. I'm going to keep doing it. I took July off. I just thought, I'm going to give myself a 1-month break. I've been doing this for free, by the way, for 6 years now. And I'm going to give myself a break and back at it again. You'll hear another one tomorrow morning about people that are caricatures of themselves and they don't even know it. With that, interview questions, or how would you like to proceed from here?
We can do questions.
Yeah, please.
I really enjoyed your commentaries, Cam. And I was wondering if you had thought about a commentary on Ukraine, the situation over there. and how we as a people could support them. But we're giving them billions, and we know that. But individually, could we support them? For instance, displaying the Ukrainian flag in front of our homes.
Sure.
Something like that, you know, some commentary on that.
There's certainly opportunity there, but let me give you the motive behind the why. I try to stay away from anything that people may consider controversial. You heard the stuff on the politics,
Yeah.
and I try to be a break from the news.
Okay.
And I think that's where many of these things are, that they've gotten a little bit of attraction. They've gotten some traction because of that. And I think we hear, I listen to the news, and I try to give people a break from the news. Now, that being said, would it be possible to somehow work something up about support for Ukraine that is not an over-the-top endorsement for one political party or one political agenda or not? Maybe. I've never considered it, quite frankly, but it's something, as long as I don't wade into anything that I feel like is going to betray the commitment I made of, I want people to listen to this and get a break.
Well, what about just displaying the Ukrainian flag?
Sure. And maybe there's something to write about there. Yeah. I don't see that there would be anything too controversial about that. Yes?
What prompted you to put together this presentation?
That guy right there, John Gage, has been one of my favorite fans. He's been very critical in a wonderful way. I consider him a great friend. But I was asked to give this presentation probably 18 months ago, and then it was 6 weeks ago that I said, what is this supposed to be about? And they said, how about doing the stories behind Keepin It Real? I went, okay. And then it was Monday that I thought, I think I got to get prepared. So I called John, and I said, listen, you've been very generous with your praise as well as criticisms over the years. How should I go about this? Which ones stand out? So he quickly rattled off a bunch of them, and I made notes, and then tried to find some sort of arc of a story in here, and that's what you see here today. If I did it again, it'd probably be something different, but this is the way it came out. I've been kind of going through all the notes and the commentaries all day long, trying to figure out how to tell these stories, the beginning and the ending of the stories. Anyone else? Yeah? Gagey?
So, this is 3 minutes and 20 seconds-ish,
Yep.
each one. Can you describe really kind of the time frame that it takes you to really, write the first draft, so on and so forth, kind of that time frame? I would assume some just flow and some are a little hard.
You're right. Some are easier than the others. And there are days when I sit down and I don't have anything. The well is dry, and I literally just start writing and see what happens. It's almost as if I'm a passenger on that train to see what comes out of my fingertips onto the screen. But when I have a plan, they usually take about an hour. And then I record them, and they take about a half an hour. And it's not a consecutive hour and a half. I'll write it, I'll come back to it, write a little more, come back to it, read it out loud, rewrite it again, because I've learned that the way I write things versus the way I read them, there's some subtleties that need to change in how it's written. And then I sit down and record it. I usually get one that I think that's good enough. Now let's go for it. So I record one that I'm confident with, now let's go for it. And try to go over the top in the voice and the inflections and stuff. And usually the go for it one is the one that ends up making it to the air. I still have a lot of work to do in the telling the story. So the tools that you have are word choice, rhythm of the words, that's all done in the writing, and then when you start reading it, when I start talking about it, you have tone and inflection and speed and emphasis and all the tools there. So you work these tools and then you master it with these tools and see what you come up with. There's probably a more efficient way. And I've tried to find people that can coach you. And there just are not a lot of people out there that are saying, hey, I can coach you on writing 3-minute commentaries. I've never found one. Just to try to get somebody to help you refine the craft. But back to the question that you asked a little while ago, sorry. About 90 minutes, but not 90 consecutive minutes. 90 minutes through the week. Yeah? Anyone? Yes, sir.
This is more of a comment than a question, but I told you I called the police. They called me back, and they said there wasn't anything at all that they could do to help us.
This is about the train.
That's about the train. And there should be a sign with a phone number to call. I went and looked. There's a sign, but it's a website.
Yeah. Yeah, there was another sign that I found a little ways away, and I called it twice, and the woman answered it and said, twice. She said, I've told them to move that train. They said they'd do it any minute now. Still 25 minutes later. Yeah, and so I can rehearse, I can prepare, I can build a presentation, I can get here early, I can wear the right clothes. I cannot control the train. I can only do so much.
There's a lot of things in life.
There's a lot of things in life, a lot of things.
Do your children get very upset with you sometimes about something?
It's a good question. They will remind me, and I have a strong belief in the following statement. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And so they will remind me from time to time, Dad, that's not the way it happened. And I will say, yeah, but this is the way that I'm telling the story. From time to time they do. I don't know that they listen, frankly. They used to listen, and we play it every morning, on Friday morning when it comes on public radio at 7:45. We play it in the house. And I'm listening first to make sure that they did it. If I did the work, I hope they're going to honor their end, and they always have. But I listen, and when they're there listening, they look at me and they roll their eyes. And they walk out of the room. Dad's so uncool. He writes this stuff. But then from time to time, one of my friends, or more importantly, one of their friends' parents, will say, we listen to this and talk to them about it. It makes them proud that their dad's doing something like that. But from time to time, they will remind me that this isn't the way it happened. But they have not gotten mad yet. That day's certainly coming. But they haven't yet. Yeah.
How old are the rest of your children now?
My oldest is 20. I've got an 18-year-old, and the twins are 16.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the 20-year-old, as you saw, is a junior at Ole Miss. Next Friday, we take the 18-year-old to the University of Alabama, and the 16-year-olds got more high school left going. So the content is rich. And it's cheaper than a therapist.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
How do you bring this together with what's working?
Oh, okay. So you know the other show. So I began, what's working, for those of you that may not know, is the radio show that I do. It airs every Wednesday night now. They changed the time on 106.5, FM Talk 106.5. And it airs once on Saturday at 2 and then once on Sunday. And it is a show about workplace, workforce, and marketplace trends. And I interview people to gather the trends. And I take those trends and I insert them into the presentations that I give. So, for example, tomorrow the presentation at the Alabama Broadcasters Association, I'll be able to say, here's what's going on in the workplace, here's the trends out there, and here's how I've gathered them. I've spoken to these people, and here's what they're doing. How do I bring it together? A same part of that conversation that I had as I began this presentation was, just prior to turning 50, what would I do more of if I could do more of what I wanted to do, what would it be? And one of them was do good interviews, see if I could do that. So I began that show. They're two separate things. The mediums are the same, they're both radio, but they serve two different purposes. What's Working show has given me confidence on the microphone. It's made me more confident behind the microphone. And whenever I'm short on time, I'll throw in a commentary and say, gosh, we got 4 minutes to fill in segment 5, let's throw in one of these commentaries, and that's easy to do. But they're two different things. What's Working is a sponsored program. I have advertisers, it pays for itself. Keepin It Real is entirely voluntary. Alabama Public Radio and I've been back and forth about some compensation. If you like it and I like doing it, let's find some token. But we've never gotten any traction on that. So they're two separate. The medium is similar, but they're two separate entities.
Do you donate money to them?
I do every year. I'm afraid if I stop, they stop playing it. Yeah, send my payment in. Yeah, my broadcast payment. Yeah, every year. Always have, by the way. It didn't just start with the commentaries, always has. So thank you all. We'll wrap it up. If you're a podcaster, you can find these things on your favorite podcast app. Enter my name, they'll come up, and there's 300 of them. Plenty of time to listen to them if you want to. And I want to thank you all for coming. It's really, really nice to see people that are interested in hearing something that's become a passion that started out as a test. I wonder if I can do this. And now, 6 years later, there are people in an auditorium hearing me talk about it. It's not what I expected at all. I'm grateful for you being here. Thank you all very much.